Hi, I'd like to welcome everyone to this month's episode of Total Wellness at the J with Todd Rockoff. I am so honored and pleased today to be joined by two friends. So we'll see how the conversation goes, but I think it will be lively and interesting. I'm joined today by Zack Bodner, who is the president and CEO of the Oshman Family JCC, and Rabbi Daniel Septimus, who is the president and CEO of Shalom Austin. We will put the full bio in the show notes. To say that I'm honored to be sitting with these two colleagues to have this conversation is really an understatement. What we're going to talk about today as we explore our wellness wheel is the idea of Jewish peoplehood, culture, and spirituality. And really, as we talk about wellness at the JCC and in our movement, Jewish peoplehood and spirituality and culture really sit at the heart of it. And when people think of JCCs, they shouldn't start by thinking of what we do in terms of physical education and recreation. They should start by thinking about what kind of a cultural and educational institution we are and how we animate the idea of Jewish peoplehood. So we're going to explore that a little bit amongst the three of us, and then we'll see whatever else we feel like talking about. So thank you both for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Did you introduce Zack first because it's an order of age?
You're right. No, it's age before beauty, Daniel. Yes.
Sure. But it is an honor to be on here. Todd still is my mentor when I entered the JCC movement. And technically, I'm also a federation CEO, but Todd's been an incredible mentor to me. So I'm honored to.
And technically, I think you're actually a federation CEO.
I am. I know. I try to be all things to all people, which is impossible, but we try.
I didn't have to add to my bio, but Daniel, as long as we're adding to your bio, you're also a rabbi and just a big old mensch. So let's just,
You're sweet. Although I'm not technically a president and CEO, I'm just a CEO. I don't know how I get the president title. Y'all have to teach me.
You just ask your board after you've been there for a decade, and they're like, okay.
It's like it's really just a nice way to make it sound bigger than it really is. So I want to start by asking you all, we talk about the JCC as the town square, the community, a place where you can get to from everywhere and get anywhere from. What does that idea mean in terms of how we bring people together and how we aren't a specific organization all the time, that sometimes we're really this communal idea of gathering and creating community?
Daniel, would you like to go first this time since I was introduced first?
You go ahead, Zack.
Well, we actually, it's good that you have each of us, Todd, because we present, I think, different perspectives, because Daniel is both a federation and a JCC, as you said, and we're not. We are just a JCC. But I say just in parentheses, because we're bigger than just a JCC in a typical way. We think of ourselves as having a geographical footprint here in Palo Alto, but also an intellectual footprint that is much, much bigger. And I think that is something that you think about a lot as well, Todd, that you're a thought leader out in the field. That's why Daniel and I both look up to you and see you as a colleague and a friend, but also a mentor, because we all think about our spaces as public town squares, where we bring in the left and the right, the Orthodox and the secular, the Trump lovers and the Trump haters, the Bibi lovers and the Bibi haters, the bacon lovers and the bacon haters. Although truth be told, nobody really hates bacon. Some people just choose not to eat it, right? If we're being honest.
That's right.
But that's what we're trying to do, Todd. We're the last intentionally Jewish space on the continent that does this. Synagogues are wonderful, but you're not walking into a synagogue on a regular basis if you're not Jewish, or if you don't embrace the same ideology of that synagogue. JCCs are these spaces where we can have these full conversations. And it's so important as we move into this era where there's such partisanship and division. And that's the beauty of the town square that I believe we create at JCCs.
Yeah. So Daniel, in your perspective, and having this campus called Shalom Austin, which is new and revitalized in its 25th year, what does that mean for you all?
So first of all, a little bit about y'all. Thank you for speaking so I could understand it, Todd. But the Dell Jewish Community Campus, the land was bought in 1992. And originally it was envisioned, we actually just did a podcast recording today about this, as the place for the JCC and the Federation. But over time, over the couple of years after 1992, the concept of bringing, and just so everyone understands, congregational communities onto the campus to have different expressions of like Jewish faith and Jewish pluralism in one space really came into being. And at first, the campus started with really two congregations, a conservative and reform. And now there's an Orthodox congregation, as well as a K through 8th grade Jewish day school. That's also a community day school. So if you think about the spaces that we've created, not only can you come into the JCC physical space and have that town square feeling, like Zack was saying, of people with different perspectives, but we can actually go into other spaces and observe in real time how the Reform community is realizing it and how the conservative and the Orthodox. And then we've had congregational communities that are not affiliated, they're pluralistic, or they're from the renewal movement that have rented space at the JCC too. And one other thing I'll share with you is that Temple Bachelor, which now has a permanent space on the campus, was incubated inside the JCC here. That's how it all started, until they were able to grow big enough to raise their own funds and to have a permanent space on the campus. So we can be an incubator as well of certain things, and things can build out of JCCs, which is, I think, a newer concept. You know, when I was growing up, I did think of the JCC as a space for early childhood or camp or great cultural arts or senior programs. I never thought of it as a place for incredible Jewish education. It just wasn't offering that when I was younger. It offers it now, and where I grew up in Houston, as you said, 5th generation Houstonian, right? So, you know, I think we've evolved. And as Zack has said, it's critical right now that we provide the space, because people today, I don't think, and I was a former congregational reform rabbi, still reform rabbi technically, but I think people are just seeking to connect to their Judaism. It's not necessarily connecting to this stream of Judaism or that stream of Judaism. And the JCC provides that space, and our campus in particular, our model, I think, provides that space as well.
I think, for us, one of the things amongst the things I'm most proud of is the way in which over the years we have enhanced and deepened our relationship with the synagogues and communal organizations, to the point where we have an annual community Shabbat here, where every congregation does services in a different space at the J. And then it's gotten so big that 400 people have Shabbat dinner together in our gymnasium. And to me, that is the town square. That we don't always have to be the provider of programs, but we are often the location. And when we have the ability to do it really well, we also sit at the table and provide thought leadership and collaboration with others. So in a couple of weeks, we'll gather here for a communal Tikkun Leil Shavuot that is being done in partnership with the synagogues. And it has enhanced the Shavuot experience, and more people are now coming to study because we're doing it in a place that people feel comfortable and maybe less threatened, but it really provides an opportunity for the synagogues to advance their own mission. And we can do that together because, I've often said nobody owns the Jews. So therefore, we should be able to create these experiences that deepen Jewish life and create a more vibrant Jewish community rather than a siloed Jewish community.
It's interesting.
I just want to add that I think that you are onto something, and it's the recognition that this is not just the download generation, it's the upload generation, right? Our kids are not just watching their friends' videos on social media. They want to upload their own stuff, right? So by hosting as the platform, the place where others can come and do Shabbat, that's exactly what the role of the JCC should be. As Daniel said, we're the incubators of new expressions of Jewish identity. So if we could provide the place, if we could provide, the challah, but if they could provide what they want to put into it, that's the best of all, I think, the best of all combinations.
Todd, when you were describing kind of that citywide Shabbat that you have, it made me think of what is done at many Hillels, especially at Texas Hillel, where I was for a few years, which is they called it a Shabbat 1000. The goal is to get 1,000 Jewish students or more in one space eating dinner together, having Reform, conservative, Orthodox, different kinds of services at one time. But it was extremely powerful to bring the community together in that one moment and to have different rabbis and educators from different backgrounds in the space at the same time working together. Chabad is part of it, Hillel, rabbis coming from the community to be in those spaces. But, And there's a lot of similarities between, I think, what Hillel's trying to do on campus with what JCCs are trying to do, I should be doing, in my opinion, in their own communities, which is convening that community together alongside federations and other communal organizations.
So I want to slightly switch gears and name Jewish peoplehood, because we said that's one of the things we were going to talk about. And I was in conversation with someone the other day, and we were talking about the idea of Jewish peoplehood, and they said there needs to be a new word, like it needs to be modernized. And I said, I'm not sure that that's the case. I think Jewish peoplehood is timeless because it is the connective tissue to our past, through today to our future, because we really are one people. We're not anything else, in my view, other than a people. And when we're a people, we have the ability to come together. What's Jewish peoplehood to you guys?
Well, I happen to agree with you. I think that, when you try to ask the question of somebody, it depends a lot on where they were born, where they were raised, what their culture is, right? For American Jews, a lot of them see Judaism as a religion. You're Protestant, you're Catholic, you're Muslim, you're Jewish. For Russian Jews, it's a nationality. Like you check off on the box, you're from Ukrainian, you're Georgian, you're Chechen, you're Jewish, right? Latin American Jews, they don't even understand the question because for them, it's like it's a whole part of their gestalt, right? So by trying to distinguish us between are we a religion, a nationality, an ethnicity, a culture, a moral code, a Reformed Jew, a conservative, we're a people, as you said, Todd. So we can use the Hebrew, we could be Amcha, whatever, but ultimately that's what embraces all of these different elements. Mordechai Kaplan called us a civilization, which is another term of art, but that almost seems more archaic in some ways, older.
I think that Am Yisrael, right? The people of Israel, and to build off what Zach was saying in particular, what I think is a couple of things. When I think of like Jewish peoplehood, anyone can join our people, right? We have a formal conversion process that people go through in different ways, depending on what movement of Judaism or which rabbi you choose. But anyone could be a part of our people. So we haven't historically been the same makeup, right, for millennia. Anyone can join it. And we have an ancestral homeland. I do think that Jewish peoplehood inherently has that at the center of who we are is the idea of Eretz Yisrael, Am Yisrael, and now Medinat Yisrael, right? That we have the land of Israel that's a part of our history and who we are and how we became a people in the first place. We are the people of Israel, right? And the 12 tribes that originated together. And today we have Medinat Yisrael. And that relationship becomes really critical to how we understand Jewish peoplehood. The other thing I'll share, and I think we all know this, is that anyone born before 1980, for the most part, understands Jewish peoplehood. They understand what it means, and especially American Jews. But we're told by educators that after 1980, we have to really teach what it means to be connected to a people, right? And that's changed. Zach, you alluded to this, the Reform movement for many years tried to get rid of the people side of it and focus just on the Protestant religious. We are a religion, less a people, right? To really fit in modernity. But I think that's completely evolved over the last 60 to 70 years.
This is, I think in some ways, for the Jewish people as we navigate through these times, this is our Sinai moment. This is the moment that we are all trying to come together from diverse backgrounds, diverse opinions, not always being in agreement with each other and trying to see our future. Daniel, you mentioned before 1980, and I may be the only one here that was before 1980. So,
excuse me, a few of us were born before 1980. Thank you.
Yeah, come on. I'm a 70s kid.
But I remember walking around middle school and high school with the wristband of a Soviet dissident, that I was walking around feeling connected to this human I didn't know, and yet their suffering was my suffering. And I wanted to do at that time what I could do to be in relationship with them. And I think that when we think about Jewish peoplehood, it really is the connection that we have to all Jewish people, and the way in which we don't all have to agree, but we can, and Zach, I'm gonna bring us to the Z3 idea because I think it expands beyond Israel. I think we can absolutely be unified without having to be uniform in the way in which we see things.
Well, I agree with you, Todd, 100%. And the Z3 project is all about unity, not uniformity. And yet I think we're challenged in this moment because if you go back to the era of the Soviet emigres, our people were all about freeing the Soviet Jews. They didn't care if they were capitalists or communists. They didn't care if they were Orthodox or pork-eating secular. They didn't care. They just embraced them as brothers and sisters and said, we're here for you. We're going to get you out. Even as recent as the Ukrainian conflict a few years ago, we were there to get Ukrainian Jews out. We didn't ask what their politics were, what their religiosity was. We didn't have a litmus test. Why is it that especially North American Jews, especially North American progressive Jews, want to put a litmus test on whether or not they're going to support Israel or Israelis? They're going to make it about, well, I don't agree with, Bibi's this or Ben Gavir's that or Smotrich's this. They're going to make it about the politics. I don't agree with the chief rabbinate not approving my conversion by a reform rabbi, right? Why are we getting into those sort of details of the politics and religiosity first? That should be a secondary or tertiary issue, where the first should be like, we are a people. Let's start by saying we are one, and we have been undergoing trauma, especially since October 7th, and we just need to be there to help, to support each other, to do whatever it takes. And then, yeah, we can disagree over the politics of religion. I don't mean to whitewash it. It's important, and we all have our opinions, as we should. But let's start from a place of unity, Todd. You're right. We need to just recognize that this trauma has defined for so many people, especially young people, since October 7th, what it means to be a people. And by the way, I don't think that we should allow our trauma to define our sense of peoplehood. That's been a mistake we've had all along. The anti-Semitism has driven this surge that we've talked about, right? More people have come out, and that's great. It's great that more people are saying, Hineni, here I am, and I want to help. But that can't be the only thing that attaches to them. We can't be making this about anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism. Our Amcha, our peoplehood, our unity has to be bigger than just that.
Well, I fear that with this surge that we talk about, and Daniel, I'll let you weigh in a second on that, is there's no stickiness, right? A surge is a big wave and then it dissipates. And I think what we need to do is to figure out a way to bring and keep community together, not about us as victims, but us as the future, the next generation of the Jewish people. And I think that JCCs provide an incredible opportunity to do that in partnership with the broader community, because we welcome people in equally. And I think we should show up authentically as ourselves, and we should be unabashedly proud to be Jewish and for JCC's a Zionist organization. And we should welcome people in and say, these are the terms, and please come in and join us.
Yeah, to your point, Todd, today I was on a call putting on my federation hat with JFNA, Jewish Federations of North America's exec call. And Mimi Kravitz, who all of us know on this call, reported out they did another study based on the original study, right, in 24 on the surge, the post-October 7th surge. Is it sticking? And the answer is it is actually sticking right now. A year later, there hasn't been that drop-off that some people feared there would be. And in particular, I think JCCs have an opportunity to engage the 55 to 74-year-old bracket, that demographic group, because they are seeking a lot of engagement. Young adults, I'm a little more skeptical about that JCCs can play that central role unless the JCCs are actually physically in a place that are accessible to young adults. We could have a whole conversation about that.
Yeah.
But 55 to 74-year-olds are looking for something. They're looking to learn. They're looking to engage. They're looking to have community. And I think JCCs could play a real role, and they're seeking it out now. And specifically, they actually do it. They're like 55 to 74-year-olds who are empty nesters. So if you're not an empty nester, it's a very low percentage of those who've come out in the post-October 7th surge because they're still focused on their family. But those who are completely empty nestered out, they're looking for community right now.
Daniel, I'd be interested in how the demographics break down geographically, because what I'm finding out here in Northern California is it actually is the ones who have kids still in school that are coming out of the woodwork, because they're seeing the anti-Semitism in their kids' schools and it's turning them into grassroots activists. There are a ton of Israelis, as you know, in Silicon Valley, and they're joining these WhatsApp groups. They're becoming mobilized. They're showing up at the school board meetings, the city council meetings. So they are also part of the surge, and it's stickier for them because they're fighting back. A lot of them are Israeli, but it's happening out here.
Two things. One, Mimi lives next door to you up in the Bay Area, so you should absolutely invite her to come take a drive down to you. But two, I think what you're describing, and maybe you can correct me, is more about the fight against anti-Semitism, right? It's when they talk about the surge, people are looking to get involved Jewishly. So I'd be curious to know if you're seeing like are they going to adult education classes? Are they seeking out opportunities to grow within the community, not just fighting on the public affairs front, which is extremely important, but actually doing things. I agree with you. When they have a vested interest, we're seeing that too in their child's education. We are seeing them come out, and that is where we're seeing them right now. I think what JFNA is saying, this 55 to 74-year-old group is really looking for something Jewishly meaningful in their lives right now. And we have an opportunity to engage them. And we talked about it's got to go beyond anti-Semitism. It's got to have some kind of Jewish joy and meaning.
I think it's a yes and. I think it's a yes and, Daniel.
For sure.
I mean, it's the old timers, the alta cockers, if we can call ourselves that. But it's also the young people, and it's not just the joy. It's what we would call pride. I mean, as we're all, I see your yellow ribbon. Todd and I are wearing the dog tags. Our kids have to have this sense of pride, which comes from a deep knowledge and a personal connection. Those two things are going to create that pride. It's going to allow them to become activists and fight back against the anti-Semitism, but also to stand for something. And I think that both are
well, and that's my big thing is I believe we need to stand up, and we need to make sure that schools are not enabling anti-Semitism against our kids. But if all we're doing is fighting, then we're on this rabbit wheel. I think what we need to be doing is finding opportunities to build allyship by being authentically ourselves, and inspiring not a sense of anger call to action, but a sense of joy that says we want to be a part of something that gives us pride, that gives us the opportunity to see a future that is different than what we're experiencing today.
But to your point, my daughter this past summer went to BBYO's International Collab program, which is supposed to be a program where you get really basically exposed to all different kinds of practices of Judaism, to Israel. And she said to me something really interesting. First of all, this is someone that came to me to the DC March, after October 7th, has been significantly involved in the Jewish community here in Austin and regionally and internationally, combating anti-Semitism. She's just became a Stand With Us intern. But she said, and it's understandable that they went a little too far to focusing just on the Israel, being pro-Israel, and focusing on how to combat anti-Semitism and all these things in school and with their peers. And there wasn't enough of that focus on that Jewish spirituality, Jewish connection, because going to Collab, that's where you're supposed to get that exposure. And she got some of that exposure, but it didn't. It probably could have been a little more balanced. It's understandable because this is the first Collab after October 7th that it ended up tilting in that direction. But I think teens are looking for a little bit of the balance. They want to be prideful and they want to be joyful and spiritually fulfilled.
I think, Daniel, I think you're right. And I think this is where, as we talk about the Z3 moment, the Zionism 3.0 moment, what we're trying to do is create the Zionism 3.0 Jew, the new Jew, the alt-new Jew, right. You get the reference, right? And that's taking the best of the Israeli chutzpah, the fighter, the one who's going to stand up and say, I'm not going to take it anymore, the courageous one, and the American or diaspora Jew that says we have some spirituality, we know what it means to do Jewish outside the realm of just the Orthodox way. We need to combine the best of both, Daniel, to be able to get our kids to be the ones that aren't going to be wandering in the desert. They're the ones to go into the promised land. We may not make it to the promised land because we may be stuck in the old way of thinking, but our kids have to take the best of both those worlds, and that's the new Jew.
And I think that that's an area where JCCs, in partnership with synagogues, federations, I don't care who leads, right? It's about we got to get it done because our kids are too important. And I think that if we don't inspire them with a love of being Jewish, a desire to create the Jewish future that they desire, and the knowledge of what that means. So not just platitudes, but some anchoring in Jewish learning and applying it to modernity, then we will have really failed in spite of the great success that we may say that we're having.
So, Todd, and I'm curious to hear, Zach, you're like well over a decade ahead of us on this, but the Israeli Jewish community and the American Jewish community, both of us are in communities where we have a lot of Israeli Jews, right? And Austin's newer to this, opportunity. Post October 7th, I saw an opening with the Israeli community. I'm kind of curious. You already had some incredible programming that we're emulating here, thanks to y'all's support in Austin. But I see something that's different. And Yakir Englander talked about this on our podcast, that he believes that the Israeli community have taken note of North American Jewry's support of Israel post October 7th. And that's opened up a new dialogue that there's opportunity for JCCs and other Jewish institutions to take advantage of. I mean, Zach, Todd, are you seeing these things in like your JCC? Because I'm seeing that as a post October 7th phenomenon here in Austin.
I'm definitely seeing it. And it starts here from the activist perspective. I'll tell you a story. After October 7th, when a lot of the American Jews were raising a lot of money through JFNA and other important organizations, we raised close to $1 billion, right? That's not what the Israelis were doing. They were filling 747s with flak jackets and camelbacks and hiking boots. And they were
the wrong stuff.
Right. Well, that's what I was getting to. You just hit my punchline. But the Tachlis was like, we're going to do this a little differently. And they didn't have the patience. They wanted to get right to the point. The American Jews, they were doing something big, bureaucracy. This money was going to take a year to filter through the process. Israelis were like, let's do it now. But what happened was, right, some of the stuff got stuck in customs. Some of the stuff was the wrong stuff. I remember a plane load of black flak jackets arriving, and they were like, we can't wear these. That's what Hamas wears. We need green ones, right? So the Israelis have turned to the Americans and say, okay, teach us the way to do this because you've been doing it for long enough that you know how to do it. So there is that willingness on the activism side. Here in Northern California, there's this whole fight against the ethnic studies curriculum, which you may or may not be as familiar with. Okay, you're both nodding. The Israelis were like, balls to the wall, we need to kill this. And the American Jews were like, it's not going to die. This is California, so let's find a way to compromise and get the ethnic studies curriculum to be okay for our community. And the Israelis were like, that's not okay. We need to kill, right? So now they're seeing that you have to find a way to meet the best of the American diplomacy and the best of the Israeli chutzpah. So Daniel, you're definitely onto something.
Well, I like the way, Zach, the Z3 Jew, but I like this idea of creating the new Jew, right? Here we are 77 years after the establishment of the state of Israel. And it's time for a new Jew that recognizes where we stand with a strong North American community, a strong Israel. And we all have some level of disagreement with something, but what we have in common is our past and our future. And if we can focus on that and put to the side the meaningful and real arguments or disagreements that we have, but come forward as a people and not that I won't walk into there or I won't walk into there, I think we will be further ahead. And I do, in spite of the data that Mimi shared, I do think it's important to try to figure out how we're going to do that with our young people.
I agree. I think if I may say something somewhat controversial, it's just so we're not all agreeing with each other all the time. And you may agree with this or not, but if I'm going to go deep for a second and psychoanalyze our people, which is a scary thing to do and risky, I want to postulate that perhaps we have not fully internalized what it means to have our sovereignty back. Because for 2,000 years, we've been a dispersed people. I think even though 77 years in, I don't think we've fully internalized what it means to be a sovereign people. And so here's how it's manifesting itself. For some, they still feel like the eternal victim. So they want to have the power and crush our enemies because if we don't, the next Holocaust is right around the corner. And for others, it's that we have this power. We still always have to take care of the underdog. We can't ever put ourselves out there front. They haven't really gotten to Hillel's, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me, if I'm only for myself. They haven't embraced that. They've really set up these two camps. But to really understand what it means to have sovereignty is to balance both the power and the principle. And some people get too much in the power. Some people get too much in the principle. And I think that the balance is what we're trying to create in the new Jew or the new Jew, Todd.
Actually, Zach, I have a concern, and I'm not saying that we're there yet. Okay. And Todd, I might have shared this with you. I think you and I started talking about this, but we keep pushing that Israel is a Jewish and democratic state to our young people, to ourselves, right? We've been taught that our whole lives. What if one day it's not a Jewish and democratic state? Are we just like, what will that connection? What will be Z4? I mean, I don't know. Like, but my point is to you, that's why when you say about Jewish sovereignty, what does that mean when you're on the Hillel side, right? If I'm not, if I'm only for myself, who am I? Versus having that power, like that dynamic is shaking out right now in Israel, right? Internally. It's a big conversation. And how we connect, there's got to be some nuance to it, which hopefully your Z3 project will solve all our problems. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, if it's a Jewish project, it'll probably just create more questions, not more answers.
That's the point.
Yeah, but I think, when Z3 birthed itself, it really birthed itself as a way of looking at Zionism in modernity. And we had a strong and vibrant American Jewish community, and we had a strong and vibrant Israel. And today, the principles of Z3 still apply to that relationship, but they actually apply internally here in America in each of our communities. So how can we recognize the idea of being unified without being uniform and welcoming a diversity of voices into the big tent where the JCC, in this case, is providing programs and services and opportunities, and not be afraid to present a program that we ourselves may disagree with or that some of our constituents disagree with, because what we want people to do is to learn. And you can't learn until you make the other person's argument. The Talmud taught us that.
I think that's the great question of the generation, Todd. And I think the answer is it starts at least with having humility and grace. It starts with being able to listen. Our kids are taught in kindergarten that we have two ears and one mouth for a reason. We should be listening twice as much as we're talking. I'm not sure as grownups we're actually listening to that same advice, but I think that's where this starts.
I do as well. And it's hard because you've got a lot of stakeholders who have certain perspectives, right? And are afraid to open up those conversations. All the more, Zach knows, and Todd, because I talked about this with you, that we brought a speaker who's definitely on the left, a Zionist, but definitely on the left. And even that scared people. And they said, this is not the right time. This is not the right time because we're in a war and whatever. And we had our reasoning as to why, and then also showing that most of the perspectives being shared are not on the left. They're mostly in the center, probably. But it's scary for some people, but if JCCs are really going to be effective in bringing people together in that town square format, we have to have different perspectives because they represent perspectives of our community. And Zach, you speak so beautifully about this, but the tent has its limitations. It's a wide tent, but there is a tent, right? And once you say I'm no longer a Zionist, you're not in the tent, or if you are specifically racist, right? Or there's some other side of that tent too. So,
right.
Right. And I think, we just have a couple minutes left, but I think the idea of a very deep and wide tent is essential to the Jewish future, and understanding where the poles are that hold that tent up is equally important. But Zach has coached me over the years that you have to not start with who's out, you start with who's in, and the who's out will become clearer as you define who's in, because that's the way you're welcoming. We have 2 minutes left because I know we're on a time frame. So I'm going to ask you each of you take 30 seconds and tell me your hopes and dreams for Jewish peoplehood as we move into the next year.
Oof, that's a big one. 30 seconds, hopes and dreams. First of all, I hope that every hostage comes home. That's number one.
Man.
I hope that this war is able to end, and that we can finally start moving along the path of peace, and that the internal challenges that Israel is facing are able to be dealt with. I don't expect that they're over in 6 to 12 months, but God willing, we're able to move towards healing. I hope that the American Jewish community can open its mind and also be a little bit more embracing of these differences that we've talked about. And I'm hoping for a year of rebuilding and recognizing that we're coming off of some real pain and having grace for each other.
Daniel?
I'm into that, especially about the hostages and coming together to really talk through some important issues. I want to put on my rabbi hat for a second. And I want people, all the Jewish peoplehood, I didn't say this earlier, is grounded in the Torah. It's where it comes from, our foundation. And I would encourage people not only to study the 5 books of Moses, which is the traditional Torah, but our entire tradition speaks to how we navigate this together as a community. And when we're fragmented, we're weaker. And when we're together, we're stronger. And to remind ourselves, even if it's opinionated or as strong as we feel about our beliefs, that we're always stronger, even when we let that other belief into the door or into the tent with us to have that conversation. So my hope is that people will come together and really channel that spirit together.
And if we study ancient texts, we aren't studying them to learn about ancient times. We're studying them to understand their applicability in modernity. And that's the Jewish people. And that the hostages should come home and we should have savlanut with one another. We should exhibit patience and understanding and move to healing and move to the Jewish future that I think we all aspire to. I want to thank you both for being here. I could spend hours and hours talking to you, and I appreciate your making the time in the middle of your day. And I thank our listeners for enjoying another episode of Total Wellness at the J. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it, Todd.
Take care, guys.
At the Tucson J, everyone belongs and some people join. For more information about our work, go to tucsonjcc.org.